Hello, welcome to Golpo Logon. Today we brought the last part of the story, The Adventure of the Dancing Man by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Story read by Ruba, audio editing, sound effect and music composed by Tungtang. All the instruments played by Ruba and Tungtang. Thumbnail and announcement by Ananto. So, here we go.
After the boy had left, Holmes gave some instructions to the servants. "If anybody comes and asks for Mrs. Cubitt," he said, "do not tell the person that tells you. Show the person straight into the sitting room." "There is something I want to explain," Holmes said. Then he told the inspector about Hilton Cubitt's visits to us in London and the pictures of the dancing man. "These drawings are kind of secret writing," said Holmes. "They all look like children's drawings, but they are messages. Each picture of a dancing man is a letter of the alphabet. Let me show you how it works. The letters of the alphabet which appears most often in English is E. The picture of the dancing man which appeared most often was this. So I knew that this picture was E. Some of the dancing men were holding flags. I guessed that the figure were the flag of the last letter of the word. But how did you find out what the other pictures meant?" I asked. "On Hilton Cubitt's second visit," went on Holmes, "he brought 3 different messages with him. The last message was this. In this message, there was no flag. So, the message had to be one single word. What could it be? The word had 5 letters, and the second and fourth letters were E. It might be sever, or liver, or never. But the most probability these words was never. So I knew these pictures were N, V, and R." "Excellent, Holmes!" I cried. "What did you do next?" "Well," said Holmes, "I knew Mrs. Cubitt's first name was Elsie. I noticed that there was another word which had 5 letters and began and ended with E. So I guessed that these probably were L, S, and I. In one message, the word Elsie was written twice. In this message, the word before Elsie had 4 letters and ended with E. I guessed the writer was asking Elsie to do something. So, now I looked for an English word of 4 letters ending in E. The best word I could think of was come. So, now I knew that these were C, O, and M. Then I looked again at the first message, which Hilton Cubitt brought us. I used the figure holding flags to divide the message into words. I wrote out the message, putting dots for the letters I didn't know. Dot M, dot E, R, E, dot, dot, E, S, L, dot, N, E, dot. The first missing letter had to be A, and the second letter had to be H. M here, A dot E, S L A N E dot. Clearly, the 2 missing letters were part of somebody's name. So, it must be M here, Abe Slaney. Then I looked at the second message again. This message worked out like this. A dot E L R I dot E S. Here I worked out that the missing letters could be T and G at Elridge's. I decided to find out if there was a place near Rittlingthorpe Manor that was called Elridge's. If there was, then I knew that this was where the writer of the messages was staying. Inspector Martin and I looked at Holmes. It was wonderful how my friend had found out the meaning of the dancing men.
"What did you do then, Mr. Holmes?"
asked the inspector. I guessed that Abe Slaney was an American. Abe is an American name. And Mrs. Cubitt had recently received a letter from America. This letter had upset her very much. So I sent a telegram to a friend in the New York police asking about Abe Slaney. This was the reply: "The most dangerous crook in Chicago." The same evening, I received Hilton Cubitt's final message. The message worked out like this: LC.RE .ARE to meet thy GO. Clearly, the missing letters had to be P and D. LC, prepare to meet thy God. I knew that Cubitt was in terrible danger. Abe Slaney was saying he was going to kill Mrs. Cubitt. So Dr. Watson and I hurried immediately to Norfolk. But unfortunately, we were too late.
Hilton Cubitt was dead. But what about Abe Slaney, Mr. Holmes?
asked Inspector Martin.
If he's the murderer and he's at Elridge's, he may escape.
Don't worry, said Holmes. He won't escape. He's coming here.
Here?
Said Inspector Martin in surprise.
Why should he come here?
Because I have written and asked him to come here. Holmes stood up and walked to the window. Look, here he is. A man was coming up the path. He was tall and handsome with a large black beard. The front door crack rang loudly.
Hide behind the door,
said Holmes quietly.
This man is very dangerous, and we must be careful.
We waited in silence for a minute. Then the sitting room door opened, and the man stepped into the room. At once Holmes put a gun against his head, and Inspector Martin put handcuffs on his wrists. The man looked at us. His black eyes looked angry. "I received a note from Mrs. Cubitt," he said. "Where is she?" "Mrs. Cubitt is badly injured," replied Holmes. "Her life is in great danger." The man cried out. He sat down on a chair and put his face in his hands. "I don't know she was injured," he said. "I shot her husband when he tried to kill me. But I would never injure Elsie. I love her more than anything in the world." Suddenly, the man looked up. "Wait," he said. "If Elsie is badly injured, who wrote this?" He opened his hand and threw a note onto the table. "I wrote it to make you come here," said Holmes. "You wrote it? But how could you know the meaning of the dancing men?" "I worked out what the figures meant," replied Holmes.
But now, tell us your story. All right, said the man. If Elsie dies, it doesn't matter what happens to me. My name is Abe Slaney, and I've known Elsie since she was a child. Her father was head of a gang crooks in Chicago, and I was a member of the gang. And Elsie's father thought of the secret riding of the dancing men. The members of the gang use it to send messages to one another. Elsie and I were engaged to be married, but Elsie hated her father's business, and she didn't want to be married to a criminal. So she ran away to England. She met and married this Englishman, Hilton Cubitt. I wrote to Elsie, but she didn't answer my letters. In the end, I came to England and stayed at L. Rogers' farm. I knew Elsie understood the pictures of the dancing men, so I left messages where she would see them. In the messages, I asked her to come away with me, but her only answer was never. Then Elsie wrote me a letter. She said she would meet me at 3 o'clock in the morning when her husband was asleep. She brought money with her. She offered me the money and asked me to go away. I became angry and tried to pull her through the window. Just then, her husband rushed in carrying a gun. He fired the gun at me and missed. At the same moment, I shot at him, and he fell down dead. I ran across the garden. As I ran, I heard the window shut behind me. I've told you the truth, gentlemen. I didn't know Elsie was hurt. She must shot herself after I left. While Abe Slaney was talking, a carriage arrived with 2 policemen in it. Inspector Martin turned to his prisoner. It's time for us to go, Slaney. Goodbye, Mr. Holmes. I hope I'll work with you again one day. As the carriage drove away, I saw the note which Abe Slaney had thrown on the table. This was what Holmes had written. If you work it out, Watson, said Holmes, you will find it means come here at once. I knew Abe Slaney would come when he read the note. You'd think Mrs. Cubitt had written it. Well, I said, criminals have used the dancing men to help them in their crimes. But now the dancing men have been used to catch a criminal. Yes, said Holmes. The dancing men have finally done some good. Thank you so very much.
Stay safe, stay fine.